And I'm here to welcome you to our finale, the last of our ThermaPen 1 live cooking classes. We will do some more, don't worry, there'll be more in your feed coming, but this is the end of that weekly cadence, the ThermaPen 1 live classes that we thought up to coincide with the launch of the ThermaPen 1. I'm wearing my ThermaPen 1 live, my ThermaPen 1 launch day t-shirt. All of the company wore this t-shirt on the day we launched the ThermaPen 1. And we thought of these cooking classes as a way to kind of celebrate the most important thing about the ThermaPen 1. And that really is that, like all the best instruments that you already have in your life, the ThermaPen 1 is an instrument that fades from view. It disappears. And just like the best television is the one that you don't notice the television is there, right? You're just immersed in the story or the game or whatever it is you're watching. And the best car is one that just takes you into the road, right? That the feel of the road and the driving experience. In that same way, the ThermaPen 1 is an instrument that is so good that it's almost invisible, right? You open it up and it turns on. There are no buttons. It has the rotating screen. It has the automatic backlight. It's waterproof. It's durable. And now it's accurate to 0.5 degrees Fahrenheit. And it has sub-second performance. So literally anywhere you put the tip of this probe, you're getting instant information about the temperature. You could measure the soil. You could measure your bath water. You could measure your coffee. But mostly you're going to be measuring meat and other proteins. You're going to be measuring vegetables. You're going to be measuring bread. You're going to be measuring candy. You're going to be measuring foods that you care about. And when you care about that food, you want to focus on what you're doing. Focus on your preparation. You pull this out of your pocket, you open it up, right? It's on, you put that probe tip wherever you need to put it, and you know the temperature, and you can make decisions about what you're cooking based on the information you get from the ThermaPen 1. And so we thought of this series of classes where we would ask our favorite people to make one of their favorite things using the ThermaPen 1 to kind of showcase that component of the ThermaPen 1. And our finale here tonight is Meat Church. It's Matt Pittman from Meat Church BBQ. Matt is a dear friend of ThermaWorks. I've spent a lot of hours with Matt at barbecue competitions. Just an all-around great guy, fun to be with. He's an amazing instructor. And that's really kind of one of the things that sets Matt apart. And that's why he's been able to kind of ditch his corporate career and throw himself full-time into barbecue and into his barbecue store down in Waxahachie, Texas, which is everything you would think Meat Church would imply, right? It's such a great name. And he's got an amazing barbecue warehouse supply down there. He travels the country teaching, and he's just a tremendous guide to, especially tonight, we're gonna have dino ribs, right? Texas style short ribs. You've got those beef ribs on the grill. Critical to make some decisions about that using your ThermaPen 1. Matt's the perfect guide for that. And the most important thing about these classes is that you get to ask questions. So queue up all your questions and Matt's gonna answer them. And here we go live. Matt Pittman, Meat Church BBQ, Texas Dino Style Ribs. Take it away, Matt.
Well, thanks, Tim. I appreciate that amazing introduction. I'm Matt Pittman, the founder, CEO, Pitmaster, and I like to say the head janitor here at Meat Church BBQ. And you guys are joining me here in my outdoor kitchen in Waxahachie, Texas. So might not look like it, but we actually are outside. My swimming pool is right there. So I'm extremely excited to be joining you guys. If you're not familiar with Meat Church, I tell people we do two things. We make small batch craft barbecue seasonings, injections, and brines that I think are kind of popular. And then the other thing is I teach barbecue, as Tim mentioned, through various mediums. We have a YouTube channel that I invest a ton of personal time in right now currently, where we drop a weekly how-to cooking video every Wednesday. Sometimes we do a couple a week. And I teach barbecue schools right here in my backyard, which is one of the coolest things I think we do. We have only done it one weekend this year, kind of hopefully coming out of the pandemic soon, but people fly from all over the world to sit right here in my personal backyard, in my kitchen, to eat my food and to hear me, talk about my passion for barbecue. I do a lot of live events, but this is one that I'm seriously most excited about. I think it's one of the last two that I will do all year. And I want to thank ThermaWorks for being flexible with me. I was actually supposed to do this earlier in the year, but I had to travel to Tennessee to cook for Thomas Rhett. So they allowed me to move it to the end. So I hope that we've saved the best for last, but I'll let you guys be the judge of that. But before we get into things, I want to talk just a quick second about ThermalWorks. And I want to tell you my story around Texas barbecue and what we're going to make today and why it's so personal to me. But like I said up front, I'm a huge ThermalWorks fan for a bunch of reasons. I mean, Tim talked about the 1 and its sub-second reading, which is honestly unbelievable. If you think about the evolution from the classic ThermaPen to the Mark IV here to now the 1, I tell people this is the #1 tool that any outdoor cook needs. So you've got to have an instant read thermometer to really make you a proper cook. I tell people that a ThermaPen quadrupled my capacity as a cook instantly. Before I got into barbecue years and years and years ago, I was a steak snob. And honestly, this is embarrassing to say now, but I couldn't figure out how to cook the perfect steak at a young age. And I did all the stupid things like cut it open and do the whole feel thing. And, an instant read thermometer is how you nail the desired doneness or internal temperature of what you're cooking, obviously. And also, I'm going to talk to you about using it for feel a little bit later as well. So I can't say enough good things about it, but I brought a few things here. I wasn't asked to do this, but, I'm a huge fan of all sorts of things that ThermalWorks does. So I use all sorts of their silicone stuff, which we'll actually use today. I use the IR guns for all kinds of things. I have thermometers in my refrigerators and freezers. I use the brush. We're going to be stirring with this stuff tonight. So, again, I'm just such a huge fan and honored that I was even asked to do this. I mean, there's been a lot of great people before me. Some of my friends have taught some of these classes. I mean, I think this led off with my friend Tuffy Stone, who is amazing. So I'm just happy to kind of be in the same sentence as some of the instructors that came before me. But let's talk about beef ribs just real quick before we jump into these. So I appreciate all the regions of barbecue. Clearly I love Texas barbecue. If we get on a plane and go to Kansas City, I'm going to love to dig into some burn ends. If we go back to my home state of Tennessee, where I was born, we go to West Tennessee and have dry ribs. That's not how I would choose to prepare ribs. But when I go see Kerry Bringle at Peg Leg Porker, I understand why he does a dry rib, and I love it. If we go to the Carolinas and we like Eastern Carolina whole hog barbecue, cooked on a cinder block pit with nothing more than salt. And then at the end, we're going to season it with Texas Pete's hot sauce, a little cider vinegar, and more salt. It doesn't get any more simple than that. And just the complexity of how that tastes like a Sam Jones barbecue, whether you're using a mustard sauce or a vinegar sauce, I love it. Again, I love all the regions of barbecue, but at the end of the day, I truly in my heart think Texas barbecue is the best. It's the king. Everybody wants to be Texas barbecue. You don't travel the world and see Billy's Carolina barbecue. I mean, you may see that, but more often than not, it's Joe's Texas barbecue or so-and-so's Texas barbecue. I grew up in the South till I was 13. I moved to Texas at 13, so I'm pretty well Texan at this point. But I grew up on pork, sweet flavor profile, a lot of barbecue sauce, really different from what I found in Texas. And so I knew barbecue to basically be pulled pork or ribs. And when I got to Texas, the first barbecue I had, I was too young to really realize how good it was, but I had a chopped beef sandwich, which may not sound like much, but I fell in love with a chopped beef sandwich. Had never had beef barbecue before. And then as I got a little bit older, where we're going to really bring this to roost for our conversation here tonight is I went to Black's in Lockhart, Texas. Lockhart is traditionally known as the barbecue capital of the world. The best barbecue in the world now probably comes out of Austin. There's great barbecue here in North Texas, but Lockhart was considered the barbecue capital of the world and where brisket really became a thing. And same can be said of beef ribs. So I sat down at Black's and I had one bite of a beef rib, and honestly, my head snapped back. You're taking high quality beef, seasoned supposedly simply with salt and pepper and smoked with post oak to complete perfection. That compared to what I grew up on in the South, having spent time in Tennessee, Alabama, Georgia, night and day. And I was like, whoa. And I was immediately drawn to the simplicity of it. We say that good barbecue doesn't need sauce. Texas is not a sauce state at all. Our barbecue is not served with sauce. You will not find barbecue sauce in Texas unless someone likes it as a condiment, which that's my problem. I love barbecue sauce of all types. But the barbecue that we make, brisket, beef ribs, turkey, those things are not going to be sauced at all. And so again, I was super drawn to that. And I didn't leave there thinking, man, I want to start this thing called Meat Church, but I knew I wanted to get into cooking outdoors. And as I got a little older, I got into cooking. I talked about it this past week. I got called by the Dallas Cowboys to cook at Monday Night Football, which was a huge honor. And I told the guys there, I said, my outdoor cooking journey really started in the parking lot 21, 22 years ago, having season tickets with the Cowboys and being thrown to the fire, being the guy that cooked on the grill and didn't know what I was doing. But as I went through years and kind of found Texas BBQ, I got outside and started cooking on my own. My wife bought me an offset. I'm self-taught in the beginning. And then now I have the good fortune of knowing everybody and their brother in barbecue. And barbecue is a big family and people help one another. So I've been mentored by some of the greats. And I think I'm a pretty good teacher. At least it's what I'm most passionate about. You will be hard pressed to find someone that's a bigger barbecue nerd than myself. I'm a sponge when it comes to meeting people in barbecue, talking about how they do things, why they do things, not trying to copy them, but just learn. And then I'm trying to cut my own path. Meat Church is a super unique brand. We're not like anybody else. Most people at our size would have opened a restaurant, but we really enjoy what we're doing and being able to spread what I call the gospel of smoked meat without having to open a restaurant. So this is a ton of fun for me. So when Tim and Kyle reached out to me to do this and asked me what I wanted to cook, I was like, man, we got to go with the king. We got to go with beef ribs. I think about the best bites in barbecue. For me, it's a beef rib. A close second is a Kansas City burn-in. There's not many bites of barbecue I would turn down, but beef ribs are tough to beat. Some people call it brisket on a stick. You guys cook a bone-in ribeye, and why do you do that? Because everybody loves to taste the meat by the bone. I don't know, but there's also something super sexy about this huge rack of ribs. It's the Brontosaurus Fred Flintstone aspect of things that makes them present really well. But I'm passionate about them because I see them cooked a lot on the internet and they're really not that hard. This will be one of the most simple things I show you. However, I think some people take them and don't actually cook them properly. I recently saw someone post some on social media and talk about the short period of time that they cook them. And a lot of times what you'll see when that happens is when you cut the beef ribs open, you'll see that the fat is not rendered properly, which is a big deal. So I'm just going to give you a few tips that will help you nail this. The hardest part about them is finding them. Once you find the beef ribs, if you follow just a few tips I'm going to give you, you can knock it out of the park. But again, I really, not to be cocky, but I think Texas barbecue is the best barbecue in my opinion. Kansas City, again, I love your burn-ins, but they can't compete with this. So I hope you guys enjoy this. We're going to jump right into it. I actually got a little bonus for you guys today because I was hungry and I was thinking what could make a pretty set. And, I watched Tuffy's video and he had so many vegetables and all this pretty stuff and all these pretty Webers. And I didn't go too crazy. I kind of like the simplistic nature of things, but I was like, you know what, I should make something else. Like what goes good with beef ribs? So before I show you that, tonight I'm going to be cooking on my mill scale 94-gallon offset smoker. I am an ambassador for mill scale, but this is just a gorgeous backyard pit. Mill scale, also in Lockhart. I felt like this was appropriate. So if I'm going to teach you the meat that I learned in Lockhart, Texas, why not cook it on a pit built in Lockhart? I'll talk about, you could cook these on different things, but super iconic brand here in Texas. You get what you pay for in an offset. And I'm starting to see more and more people that will ultimately want to upgrade to a mill scale. But this will be in my family forever. My kids will cook on this long after I'm gone. And I'm a vintage cast iron collector, so I think that's kind of cool. If you think about the stories that this will tell, who it's cooked for, just like this butcher block, if I could tell you all the people that have eaten food off of this block, that's what it's all about. That's why we call it Meat Church. It's about bringing people together to make great memories around good food and drink. That's why we're here. At the end of the day, nobody really cares how it was cooked, other than the people cooking it and the time that goes.
That's a negative. Howie's trying one more reset on his side.
Okay.
For some reason, Zoom kicked us out. Has never happened.
What did it say?
It looks like you're good to go, Matt.
I'm good to go. Okay. Yep. All right. We're back. Okay, guys. Sorry about that. What would we do without Zoom? Anyway, all I did was bring out our smoked queso. I'm not sure if that got cut off. The recipe's on meatchurch.com. The video's on YouTube. It's amazing with beef ribs. So now you didn't miss anything. We're talking beef ribs. I did say that this was the year of the fly here in Texas, and the flies have our address. There's been no food out here all day, and this is the cleanest kitchen you'll find outside. And so if you see flies coming in, it is what it is. It's called cooking outside, because I don't cook inside. Cooking inside is boring. It's all about the adventure and fun of being outside. So that's why we're here. But first off, what do we got here? So these are the big boys. These are known as beef short ribs. Sometimes they're called plate ribs. 1, 2, 3 A's a cut. These are the big ones. If you can't find these for some reason, chuck ribs are a good alternative. There are barbecue joints in Texas that do serve those. As go beef prices right now, they are incredibly high. $9 a pound is kind of what I see here in Texas. They're pretty readily available here. I know in some places they're kind of difficult to find, but I recommend going, talking to your butcher, ask your grocery store. If you ever go in anywhere and see cross-cut ribs or flanking cut ribs, you know, say, hey, can I buy those before you actually cut them down to 1-inch strips? And you'll be able to find them. But I actually use 44 Farms ribs, beef ribs out of Cameron, Texas. It's my beef partner, but really good, amazing Texas beef. So that's what I cook. I didn't hand select a rack to prepare for you guys today. I just grabbed one, and you can really tell because these suckers are fat. This cow lived a good life. So there's a fair amount of work to be done on these. But anyway, let's talk about what we're doing, what we're going to do. So when I see people prepare these on social media, I'm going to say up front, you do not have to remove every bit of the fat and every bit of the silver skin if you don't want to. This is not a competition. You know, if this was a brisket where you see people take every ounce of fat off the meat side, where you just see like beautifully marbled meat, you could do that. But you also run the risk of cutting too deep for meat that you paid a pretty penny for. So I'll kind of leave it to you guys how far you want to go with it. But my opinion on beef ribs, there is silver skin right here. If you're cooking wild game, silver skin can give you a very gamey taste. So it's important to remove all the silver. Not as important on beef ribs. If you look at Meat Church's Instagram post this morning and then story today, I actually put some behind the scenes of the 2 racks that I've cooked for you guys tonight. And so you can actually see what they look like. I did take most of the silver off of those. You can see fat in areas, and I'll talk about that. For instance, on this rack, this gets super thin over here. And, you know, if I took all of this fat off, there's not even any meat there anyway. So I'm not really particular if I take that off or not. There's no, like I said, there's literally no meat underneath that. So it doesn't really matter. But if, hopefully you guys can see this pretty well, but meat here, a lot of hard fat here, a lot of silver skin here. Most important thing, bring it out of the fridge cold. Try not to let it sit out and warm up. The colder, the better to trim it. And a sharp knife is your friend. So if I mentioned that the 1 is the number 1 tool you need in outdoor cooking, the second is Meat Church seasoning. But tops of the list is a sharp knife. This is a Meat Church Victorinox flexible boning knife, and it's my number 1 knife that I use because I trim so much. So it's cheap, it's inexpensive. It's like $20. Now I use beautiful chef knives. Like this is my Messermeister chef knife. I use this stuff for a lot of other things, but I love a boning knife because I do so much with it. And really all you're going to do is you're going to lay this knife flat and you're going to shave away excess fat. So keep in mind, before anyone comments about this, fat is flavor, but in moderation. So you can decide how much you want to take off. Don't let anybody tell you got to take it all off. You got to leave it all on. It's up to you. But what I like to do is kind of feel around and say, where's there excess meat? Let's take that off of there. Anything that's hanging off, like see this thing hanging off, cut that off. You want things to cook evenly. So anything that's really thin, just like on a brisket, you can get rid of it. I'll kind of trim down the corners where things are hanging off, but I'm just gonna jump in to start trimming this fat away. So as I take this excess fat, you'll probably start to see the silver skin. You know, this isn't the longest class I've ever done, so I don't know how far we're gonna take this. I'm gonna give you guys a pretty good example. And again, I'm laying my knife flat because I don't want to cut into this meat. And go carefully. If you've never done this, take it easy because you can always take fat off. You can take things off, but you can't add it back, right? So I know that sounds kind of silly, but I'm actually just removing the fat to expose the silver to show you that's all silver skin. I can't believe how much is on this one. I picked literally the worst rack ever as far as how much work I have to do on it, but that's okay. So flat. And you guys feel free to fire away questions in the chat. Are there questions coming in? Here, you want to turn this around and see if you can? I'm not seeing the right ones. I don't think. Go ahead. Go ahead and see if you can get them up there. I think I'm seeing the wrong chat, so I'll get those while I'm trimming. I'll get your questions up. All right, so trimming this away. So this is all silver skin. A little bit of fat left here I need to take off. I don't want to, I want to keep these as even as possible. So I don't want to dig too deep into this, like I said, but let me show you how you go about getting silver off. You can go from either end that you want, but this is a super sharp knife. And I just like to go underneath, get my knife just right underneath. Can I see it or no? Okay, yeah, I'm gonna have my friend Kirk here read some questions. So before I take that, let me just show you guys what I'm doing. I'm just right underneath the silver skin, and you'll do this several times, obviously, to remove this. This is pretty excessive silver skin, so I would likely opt to get all that off there. And you can see here that just takes it right off with a sharp knife. So I'm just gonna keep doing that. I'm gonna take some questions here while I'm doing this, so I don't bore you guys to death. Ready?
From Joe G. Matt, I can only get short ribs individually and not in a rack. Is there a way to smoke without them being in a rack?
Question from Joe is, I can only get these individually and not in a rack. Is there a way to smoke them individually? Yeah, totally. It's not my preference. I like to cook them whole, but our grocery store here, frequently, I don't know why they do that. Maybe people don't want to buy all three. It is expensive. But yeah, you can do the same thing and cook them individually. Make sure you don't dry them out. I'll talk later about how wrapping is optional. If I was cooking them individually, I would be more likely to wrap than not. But yeah, you could cook the individual.
What are the ribs that have 4 bones?
Great question. What are the ribs that have 4 bones? So those are chuck ribs. So those are 4-bone beef ribs are known as chuck ribs. Also very good. If you come down here to Texas and you went to, say, Style Switch in Austin, they actually, I don't know if it's true right now, but at least at one point, that's what they served as their beef ribs. They didn't actually serve these beef plate ribs, and they're great. So these I think are the best, but the chuck ribs are good as well. And by the way, Costco here locally in the Dallas-Fort Worth area, you can frequently get chuck ribs where you can't always get these short ribs.
One more?
Yeah, another question.
All right. If doing this on a pellet smoker, what type of pellet do you suggest?
So question is, I might save that one, but the question was, if you're doing this on a pellet smoker, what pellet would you suggest? I'll go ahead and answer it, and I'll talk more about it when we get to the cook process. I like heavy smoke woods. In Texas, we cook our beef with post oak. So I like to use oak, mesquite, hickory. I don't have time for fruit woods and alders and maples, and I want this to be smoky. That's the point. Now, with that said, you can use whatever the heck you want, but I'm trying to build bark. I want big, heavy smoke, and so I like oak. Now, since pellet question, I get to answer this. Meat Church and Traeger have a pellet out right now, and it's a story of my barbecue life. I grew up in the South, like I told you earlier, with a lot of hickory, and down here everything's cooked with oak. So it's what I think the perfect blend of oak and hickory. And it's the only thing I'm using in my Traegers right now. So I highly recommend that as well. I'm biased, but it's really good. And it's a heavy smoke. I think it's actually Traeger's heaviest smoked pellet they have in their offering right now, to be honest with you. Great question. And as you can see, I'm starting to get a lot of that silver off, and I'm going to keep going with this a little bit because I'm going to season it for you. So are the chuck ribs the same as beef back ribs? No. Beef back ribs are my least favorite. I actually stared at some today in the store. Beef back ribs, they're just not real meaty. They look longer, like a rack of pork ribs. There's not as much beef in them, so it's definitely not the same. like I said, my least favorite just because they're less meaty. Doesn't mean they're not good. In fact, I'll probably do something with some of those soon because I get asked about it. You can find those really easily. I get asked about it a fair amount. So I've got a really small offset smoker. Would this cook work well on something smaller than mill scale 94? Yeah. So I'll talk about, I will definitely talk about offsets in here in just a minute, but that in particular, you got to use what you got. So, I tell people all the time, I don't judge people for what they cook on. I don't care if you're cooking on an offset, a Kamado, a pellet. A lot of people I know are cooking on some offset their uncle made them or something like that. So it means something to them. It was a gift. I mean, hell, I'd cook on a trash can if I had to. In fact, I had a buddy that was stationed overseas and he, took a drum and made a smoker out of it. So, by the way, this is a really uneven rack of ribs. I didn't just completely butcher this, but this one, you kind of got to be cognizant of that when you're doing your thing. But there is still some fat left over here, but it gets real thin and I don't want to dig that out anymore. I'm not taking that off because I mentioned earlier, there is literally no meat there. So I'm not worried about that. It's going to take a little more off right here. And then I'm going to call this good. But keep firing away your questions and I'll do my best to answer. All right, let me get this big old pile out of here. All right, now that we've got these nice and trimmed, all right. First thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna flip them over so you can see this to the membrane side. So teaching point for me, I do not pull the membrane on beef ribs. I used to. I actually like the way they cook with the membrane on. There's no meat on the back side of this. You normally eat these different than a pork rib. When I teach pork ribs, I talk about pulling that membrane because I don't want to take a bite of a pork rib and taste that nasty membrane underneath. This is different. These are normally eaten a little bit differently. Normally, you're not eating it off the bone. You can. I see people pull all the meat off the bones, cube them up. But the thing with the membrane on beef ribs, this is the only thing holding this thing together by the time we get done cooking it. So what I like to do is I score it. And I'm going to come across, I'm making every inch just a diagonal slice. I'm going to turn these and I'll show this to you in a diamond pattern, just like you would do on pork, like on a pork butt. And so why do you score like that? So look, when you're cooking big cuts for a long period of time, fat cinches up and it causes the meat to curl. This will help it stay flat and relaxed, still intact, help the fat render. So it's just what I choose to do. You can try for yourself, actually taking the membrane off if you want. But a lot of my buddies in Texas BBQ, in the most iconic barbecue joints in Texas, don't bother. So I'm not going to do it. What should I use honey bacon rub on? Not relevant to tonight, but I love where your head's at because that is definitely one of our favorite rubs. Our honey bacon is amazing on ribs. It's great on all things pork, to be honest with you. It's actually great in your hand. The honey bacon raw is my favorite, but I like it on all things pork. It's good on popcorn. Okay, so these are trimmed. So let's talk seasoning. Typically, you guys follow me, you know where I'm going all day long. Meat Church, holy cow. This is my first rub. It's what I took on Barbecue Pitmasters in 2014. It's mostly, I call it a Texas rub, but it is mostly salt and pepper. It's got a little bit of garlic. It's technically an SPG. But this is our beef rub. In the holidays, I do put it on turkeys and chicken for a bold pepper pot, but this is a pepper forward rub. This is not what I would consider like the most balanced rub. It's all about the pepper, and that's what Texas is about. You come down here and eat Central Texas barbecue, you're going to get that black pepper punch. So that's what this is about. So the easy go-to is to just season this, pretty liberally with Meat Church Holy Cow, and you can call it good. But I thought I'd do something a little bit different for you guys today. I have a beef rib recipe on meatchurch.com, on our YouTube channel, and it's all holy cow. So definitely way to go. You guys more than likely have the rub. It'll take you to the promised land. But I want to go with something a little different today. And I'm going to go with I'm going to teach you something. So Texas barbecue is known to be salt and pepper, or is it? So if you're in the industry and you know enough people in Central Texas, I could whittle on this stuff all day long. You know that it's not always just salt and pepper. It's primarily salt and pepper, but often there's a little something else. Hence why I have garlic in holy cow. But what I did for the ones I prepared today is we are going kind of 50-50 salt and pepper, but I'm actually adjusting the salt. So I'm going 50-50 salt, pepper, but I'm going 2 parts 16 mesh black pepper. So this is coarse cracked pepper. It's the same pepper that's in Holy Cow. But so 2 parts of that. And then, man, the rain is coming in. But I'm doing 1 part salt and then 1 part Meat Church seasonal, which this could be kind of comparable. Well, it's not Lowry seasoned salt, but that's what it might remind you of. I mean, I guess it's similar purpose. It's not similar recipe necessarily. But 2 parts pepper, 1 part salt, 1 part Lowry's is a thing here in Texas. And so that's what we went with on the ones we cooked today. It's getting a little windy, so I apologize for that. So let's get the seasoning. And I'm not actually going to measure it. I'm going to do this by hand. This wind has come in out of nowhere. Yeah.
Good idea to use a binder like mustard.
Great question. Is it a good idea to use a binder like mustard? You absolutely could. When I'm trimming a meat and it's nice and wet, and I know the seasoning would here, I don't always bother. With that said, and, you know, there's guys in Austin using mustard. There's guys using pickle juice. There's guys using a mix. There's people using Worcestershire sauce. You're welcome to use a binder, but if you know me and follow me, I say I'm about simplistic barbecue. Getting loud. I'm about showing you the most simplistic way to make amazing barbecue. So you don't have to have it. Now you certainly can do it. When I cook pork, I grew up on slather and stuff and mustard. So we'll do that. So no problem if you want to do it, but you don't have to. And I'm seasoning the top and the sides. I'm not going to bother seasoning that side. And I should have said this up front, but I usually season about 18 inches up to keep it nice and even. Now, why am I doing the pepper first? So this is a good teaching point here. Pepper helps you build bark. Huge point today. So I want to put the pepper on first because I want the pepper to stick. I don't want another seasoning on there so the pepper bounces off. If I had some other stuff on here, the pepper might not adhere. So I want to make sure this pepper makes it on here. That's the key ingredient. This will help you build bark. People ask me all the time, how do you get that dark bark on a Traeger? Holy Cow rub with all the pepper in it, a heavy smoke pellet or wood in the offset, low and slow temperature, you're going to get that bark. And you're going to see the bark on these. I season the ones I'm cooking for you tonight just like this. So now I'm going to go a little bit lighter with the salt. And this is regular salt. Yeah, it's hard for you to tell how much I'm doing because it's even hard for me to see. And then I'm going to take our seasoned salt. I'm going to come back across the top. And I'm, you know, look, I'm not measuring it. I'm trying to go 2 to 1, but I'm not actually measuring it. I don't, you know, do I have to put the same amount of salt on the edges? You know, look, it's the edge. It's not as big a deal. Again, I'm not doing the backside. Okay. There's been no rain here forever, and rain hits today, and I feel like it's like coming in right now. Okay, so what I would do is I would let this sit in it here for at least 15, 20 minutes. There's nothing wrong with letting it sit longer. I mean, you want to do it overnight because you're cooking it in the morning, knock yourself out. But let's get rolling and jump into the cook because this is super simple what I'm about to show you. And I'm gonna move this out of the way. So the cook process on these beef ribs is really what I call a 2-step process, but it's extremely, extremely simple. So on my mill scale, I'm running a fire at 250 degrees. Since I've been sitting here, it's dropped to 200, but that's okay because the beef ribs are done. 250 degrees, I'm running post oak. So Texas barbecue is cooked with post oak. It's a heavy smoking wood. You know, I wasn't too familiar with it until I came to Texas, but this is what we cook everything with. So it's very traditional Texas. And I'm reaching over here, probably out of screen. I keep my next logs on top of my firebox to warm them up. So that's what I'm reaching over for. So 250 degrees is my target. If you want to go a little lower, a little higher, no big deal. I ran this stick burner all day. So as the day goes, it was time that the fire ran up closer to 300. There was times I came out here and it was as low as 200, but I'm sure it averaged around 250 for most of the day. You know, you could do the same thing on a Traeger, any other pellet grill you've got. People are busy in 2021. I say that all the time. It's very therapeutic to run a stick burner, but with work and kids and commitments, you know, people don't necessarily have that kind of time, and that's okay. You can certainly run this on whatever type of grill that you guys have. But today, like I said, we're gonna go old school, and that's what this is all about. So my cook process, if you followed us on Instagram, this was real time. When I put these on today and posted it, that was actual real time. So these went on about 9 o'clock Central. And I mean, so now it's what, 7:45. I've got a rack off in the warmer, and then I put one back on just so that you can see it, but they've been done since just before we started. But here's my two-step process, and it's extremely simple. I put these beef ribs on, and I'm going to open this up and pull them out in a minute. I don't touch them. I don't, I have a water pan over here on the deflector plate of my offset to add moisture to the cook chamber, but I actually didn't spritz these today. The beef ribs looked wet all day. They never looked like they needed spritzing. If you want to spritz, I use a hog sprayer and spritz with cider vinegar on all of my meats, and I'll just do it when something looks dry. But the more you spritz, it slows down bark development. So I don't think it needed it today, so I didn't do it. If something started to look dried out, I would have spritzed it. But again, my two-step process was I just ran this fire all day. These beef ribs have not moved other than to come out and go back in right before we started. I cooked them until about 175 internal. So with my ThermaPen 1, right here, just in the thick part between two bones, I'm looking for visual cues first. And I'll pull these over so you can see them, but they got really dark bark. I'm looking for the bark to look right and use that visual cue. And then this is like, okay, yep, you're right. It is that temperature. So that's what I'm doing. I'm looking at the bark and it looks really set. I'm feeling it. It's still pretty firm. But then I use my ThermaPen to say, all right, they're, 160, whatever the case is. A lot of people wrap in the stall of a brisket, which is 165 or so. I try to take mine a little further before I wrap them, before I go to step 2, which, by the way, you don't have to wrap if you don't want. A lot of times I'll cook beef ribs and I won't wrap them whatsoever. But we did wrap today just for the end. So if I'm running beef ribs for 8 to 9 hours, I'm wrapping for the last 1, maybe 2 hours. But I'm typically wrapping them in unwaxed butcher paper. Let me show you that. Got a frame here. My little table. So I'm using unwaxed Meat Church unwaxed butcher paper. You could also use foil if you want. Again, wrapping around 175 degrees, which that's going to leave us 1 to 2 hours to cook. So the two-step process is 36, 37 degrees out of the fridge, all the way to 175. We're going to wrap them in paper, and I'll show you how I wrap. We'll leave them wrapped until they're done. And here's a key point. So once we wrapped them, let them keep going, same temperature. And what I'm looking for is I'm going to fill them first to kind of feel them be a little bit jiggly. That's what you want. Pitmasters here in Texas will actually pick the rack up, and when they kind of move it, they feel like they're done. I don't teach backyard cooks that. You guys aren't cooking 30, 40 racks a day. You might be cooking one every 3 months. And so use this. But here is a huge takeaway. When are they done? A lot of people say a brisket's done at 203. Yeah, this could be done at 203, but if I had to give you a temperature, I want beef ribs closer to 210. I want that fat really rendered out. And you can feel this. There's not going to be a lot of give. It's going to be really, it's not going to bounce back to you. But use your ThermaPen 1 for 2 things. That's what I tell people. Actually, don't look at the number. Look away from it and feel it. Like, these right now are 200. So they had been done, rested, and I put back on here because I want to, the reveal of pulling them off here. But I encourage you to do this and be like, oh man, there's no resistance. I'm poking all over, and it's just a probe, right? It's like a skewer, like there's nothing there. That feels great. Then you can look at it and be like, oh yeah. They're 198 now because they've come down a little, but I had these up to, one was 209, one was 210 when we pulled them. And it's that simple. So I'm gonna go ahead and get this rack out and keep talking about it. How gorgeous those look. And I'll put some insulated gloves on to kind of illustrate my point. Now, again, these have come out and been rested and then put back in there, so they've heated up a bit. So ignore that. But let me kind of show you the feel aspect. Can we buy your paper online? We actually don't sell it online yet. We only sell it in our flagship store to give you a reason to come into it here. We will offer it online soon. But what I would see, I don't know how well you can see this, but I'm moving these around with complete ease, right? That's done. Let me see if I know we're using, let's see here. So again, these have gone all the way, been put back in, so they're not right off the smoker where they would be at 210, but you can still see there's like super shifty. And these are, this rack actually I never wrapped. I cooked these all the way through, so these have killer bark. I mean, look at that. That was seasoned the same way by hand. That bark is epic. The other rack, which I'm going to have my friend Kirk grab here, I'll show you. We actually wrapped for the last 2 hours of the cook, sir, in our butcher paper. I have not unwrapped these at all, so they've been sitting in this paper. Actually, you know what? Before I show you that, I told you that I would show you how to actually wrap these. So let me take a step back real quick and show you that. So this is 18-inch paper. I'm going to rip 2 pieces off real quick. Oh, I can probably reach it. I'm actually going to show you my sprayer as well. I use a hog sprayer. You could get this at like any feed store. When I say hog, I mean like competition pig. And what I do is I'm overlapping this paper, and then I'll take my sprayer and I'll actually spray the paper a little bit. It's windy, so bear with me. I know this isn't the most graceful thing I've ever done. You'll see people do that and be like, what the heck are they doing? I'm going to lay these beef ribs meat down right in the middle. Okay, you're good. Okay. Tuck it under. Looks like swaddling a baby. This is the same way I do a brisket. Pull this tight. Oh, it is windy. Just our luck. Get it done. Okay, question came in. Do I ever use tallow when wrapping? Tallow has become so trendy. I don't know a single reputable barbecue joint in Texas that's necessarily wrapping in tallow their beef ribs. You can. I mean, look, I'm not going to go into what barbecue joints I know in Texas that do wrap briskets in tallow. It's not a new secret. It kind of came to light on YouTube. I think it kind of popped up this year, but it's something we've known about for years and just really not talked about. But people will wrap in tallow for various reasons. The main reason is for holding. So you could put tallow in the wrap, and then as it's holding, it would sit in that rendered beef fat. But it's not, I mean, look, this one rack I showed you, I didn't need to add extra moisture. It was not wrapped. So I don't. If I was holding something for some extended period of time, I might use it as a tool, or if I thought I, was drying something out. But no, I don't think you need to. It's okay if you want to, but that's how you wrap. So again, just going back to the cook, 2 steps. We put the meat on. We didn't hardly touch it. We didn't touch it. We let it go to 175. We wrapped it like this. We put it back in, and it was maybe 2 hours to get to that jiggliness, and we were good to go. I'm going to pull these back out so we can compare it to the wrap rack. Sorry, what did I spray with? Great question. That's cider vinegar. It's actually diluted with a little bit of water. You can just use water. Again, that is about, you spray the paper to make it more pliable so you can wrap it. That's why you see people do that. And then look, there's no tallow on this. You guys see how wet that is? It's 100% wet. That's not tallow. That's just what came out in the cook process. I'm 100% truthful. But I didn't really say this in the beginning. I say this in every class I teach. My way is not the right way. My way is just what I choose to do. The great thing about cooking is make it your own. Do what makes you happy. Hell, I change things all the time. By the way, save that fat paper and light your fire with that next time. You probably noticed there's probably not a whole heck of a lot of difference. These I know have come down quite a bit in temp. Yeah, these are like much lower than these. You want to rest them for at least an hour. But again, my way is not the right way. I'm just giving you a guide, a way that I like to do things. Make it your own. You guys want to wrap with tallow, you want to season with something else, do whatever makes you happy. That's half the fun in it. I mean, I change things all the time. If I was sitting here trying to push what I do, I would have just seasoned and holy cow and moved on. But I'm trying to teach you guys something different, something fun. I was really looking forward to this class and thought I'd let you in on a couple Texas barbecue secrets, basically. Fire away some questions. I'm going to cut into one of these. By the way, look how beautiful these are. I mean, just amazing bark, beautiful bark. This rack, not wrapped whatsoever. This was wrapped for the last couple hours. They went about 9 hours. This rack is bigger than this rack, by the way. This was almost 1 pound bigger. So one reason it went a little bit longer. But I'm gonna let that sit. And question? Is it okay to season the night before? I think it's okay to season beef ribs the night before. I would never season pork ribs the night before, but I think it's okay with beef ribs. Beef ribs and brisket, if you want to season the night before, the salt and the seasoning pulls moisture out, but these are big cuts and it's not going to hurt it. Have I smoked blueberries before? You know what? I have smoked most things, and I have never smoked blueberries. I should have, I could cut this down because it's on this big bone. You also can just slide these right off. So I'll kind of do a little bit of both for y'all. These actually have like pretty serious bark and pretty serious crunch as well. Go ahead and just like let you in on a little bit of that, which, man, I ain't mad at that. It's hot on my bare hand. Let's see if I can just go ahead, fire off more questions. By the way, perfectly cooked beef ribs when you can do this. Total cook time? Between 8 and 9 hours. One was closer to 8, one was closer to 9. But again, this was a pound bigger. What else we got? Man, this bark right here is crazy. Crazy bark. I mean, like crunch. I encourage you guys to buy 2 packs of beef ribs and do man, dude, look at that moisture, that juice come out of there. No, I mean, look at that. Crazy. This is going to be hard to cut because I didn't let it cool off. So anyway, probably easier with an electric knife, but you could also just cut that membrane right off the back if you pull the bones like that, which is what I normally do.
Do beef ribs stall during the cook process?
Do beef ribs stall? I mean, so let me talk about this stall in general. I don't worry about the stall. People, I get asked that all the time about brisket, and it's just, look, so your temperature climbs like this and then things stall out, before you kind of power through. It is what it is. I don't worry about it. I don't, I think early on in my barbecue career, lots of people talked about the Texas crutch and wrapping in foil to power through the stall. But I told you on these, I actually just went straight through the stall before I even wrapped them in the first place. So, again, I'm not worried about it. I'm going to kind of put these where you guys can see these. Dang, that is crazy. Look at that crazy smoke ring on these. I mean, that's all that pepper. I mean, that's the craziest bark right there. That's like insane bark.
Is the bark bitter?
Is the bark bitter? No, the bark is not bitter. Heck no. I mean, let's get into trying this. Why don't we? That's hot. Nope, not bitter. Tastes like heaven. I think I'm gonna put a little bit of the smoked queso there. How about that? Told you what goes better with beef rib than smoked queso. Nothing. So if you're new to the broadcast, didn't mean to throw that all over you. These are beef short ribs, plate ribs, short ribs, 1, 2, 3 A ribs. These are the big ones. These are the big ones. What other questions you guys have? I shouldn't be crunching chips in y'all's ear. Like, I think we did pretty dang good.
Do you think the voodoo would work well on beef ribs?
Do I think voodoo would work well on beef ribs? Well, the voodoo is our #1 selling rub. It is an all-purpose. I haven't found anything I don't like it on. With that said, I'm a traditionalist. I want more pepper forward rub on my beef. I don't think it would be bad, but it wouldn't be my number one choice. But you know what? Go cook that and come back to me and tell me how it was.
If you want to do a quick Cliff Notes version on the queso, since that part was mostly cut out.
Oh yeah. So question about the queso, just real quick, since the video kind of paused. Queso's super easy. It's on meatchurch.com. The YouTube video kind of went nuts last year during COVID, but it's very, very simple. It's 2 pounds of ground meat. This is elk in this case. A lot of people, my recipe calls for hot breakfast sausage, which is really good. It's 1 block of Velveeta. Don't use the cheap stuff, and don't laugh because I sell Velveeta, because it is delicious. It is 1 pound of smoked Gouda that I actually get at my deli counter. It's the cheapest way to buy it, and it's the most tastiest. It's 2 cans of Rotel, 1 can of cream of whatever. I use cream of jalapeno or cream of poblano because I'm in Texas and we can get it. A lot of people use cream of mushroom, which may sound weird, but you don't taste it. That is because of the consistency of the Velveeta. It has a bunch of voodoo in it. And then it's basically, put on the smoker at least an hour, but I had it on the smoker half the day, stirring it constantly. I garnished it with cilantro, tomatoes, and I did cook it with a jalapeno in it, and it is amazing. So whether you like Velveeta or not, have that at your tailgating party and it will get inhaled. In fact, I would like to inject that into my veins if that was possible. So it is super, super good. It's very inexpensive, super easy to make, and it's great. Any other questions?
About how often do you season your meal scale?
Okay, so how often do I season my meal scale? The only thing I do with my meal scale at this point is I render tallow and I wipe the outside of it down with tallow. That's my number one use for tallow, to keep it from weather or keep it from rusting. Same thing I do with cast iron. When you talk about the inside of the pit, and how often do you season it? There's a big misconception around the inside of a pit. Some of the best competition cooks in the world actually take their pit to a car wash after the comp and spray it all out. So keep your pits clean. I mean, I don't season it after the initial seasoning. You don't have to. There's so much stuff being cooked in there and grease dripping in there that I don't worry about it. But if you're using a pellet grill or something, be sure to clean it out. You don't want to cause a grease fire. There was a question that said, I love your spices and Holy Cow, but my wife doesn't like the pepper. What would be a good alternative? That's easy. Holy Gospel. It's a more tame version. Holy Gospel is a mixture of Holy Cow and the Gospel. So it can be described as a more peppery gospel, or to a lesser degree, a more tame version of Holy Cow. But it's really good on steaks too. I tell a lot of couples, if the guy likes Holy Cow and the female thinks the pepper's too much, then try Holy Gospel and you'll love that. Any more questions before we wrap up?
The last one is, when do you use injections?
When do I use injections? I actually don't inject in the backyard. Look, I'm a guy that sells injections. I got a beef injection, pork injection, chicken injection. I'm never mad if you want to try it. When you compete, you have to inject and brine. They call it one bite barbecue because it's got to be super juicy, lots of stuff going on with it. You don't really have a choice. But in the backyard, I'm more of a purist, and I don't think that it's necessary, especially not on a beef rib or anything like that. So I don't do it on a regular basis. If I inject anything, it's pork. But if I'm coming out to cook a brisket for my friends and family, beef ribs, whatever, I do not inject it typically.
On a light note, how come you aren't as big as a house? Are you a triathlete?
How come I'm not as big as a house? I'm not a triathlete. Well, yeah, it's probably pretty hard to see, but I have an Ironman tattoo on my calf. But don't let me fool you. I don't run anymore. I hate running. I did Ironman Florida in 2010 and am 10,000% retired from trying to be the best at exercise at this point. But I tell people all the time, I get people that pop off to me and say, never trust a skinny chef. And I say, well, if I was big and fat, I wouldn't have a hot wife anymore. So it's about balance. I can't eat all of this in moderation. I actually eat pretty healthy during the week, I think, but I certainly try all of this stuff. But it's a balance, man. It's tough. I'm in the wrong business to be skinny, but I've been fortunate that I think I have a tapeworm is really the short answer I should have given you. But I really appreciate you guys joining me in my backyard today. Sorry, the storm is like blowing in, like as right in the middle of this thing. But I'm super proud of how these turned out. This is, it's totally properly rendered. Great smoke ring, super juicy. I don't want to squeeze that. You should never squeeze your meat. You're robbing yourself a big juicy bite. But hopefully you guys can see that. These things have just epic bark, amazing smoke ring from that post oak. Cook long enough to render the fat down. Don't cook your beef ribs in 6 hours. Let them go longer. And anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed. But thanks for joining me. ThermoWorks, thank you so much for having me out. And back to you guys.
Thank you so much for that, Matt. That was amazing. Thanks for all those great questions. And thank you everyone for being a part of this ThermaPen 1 live cooking class experience. It's been a real pleasure for us to be able to share with you our passion for the ThermaPen and for great food and for good cooking and to assemble some of our favorite people. This has been awesome. We're gonna do it again real soon. We'll let you know about future classes in our YouTube feed. Be sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel. And think about the ThermaPen 1. You got Thanksgiving coming up. And then after that, it's Christmas. It makes an amazing gift. And we want everyone to have the experience of cooking with this beautiful machine. So until next time, take care and have some great food with your ThermaPen 1.